Let's talk about Doctor Who, shall we? It's the year of our Lord 2020, and BBC is like, we want to do something different with Doctor Who. They've got all these people making Doctor Who merchandise. They got people doing comics, they got people doing audiobooks, they got people doing books, regular books, they got people doing audiobooks that aren't the audiobooks that you're thinking of. They got so much stuff, and they're like, we want to get everyone on board for all this shit that we make every year. So they have an idea, and it's a good idea. They have an idea to make one massive story that is covered by all of these different formats. And you get individual stories if you just read the books or read the comics or blah 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 blah. But if you do all of it, then you get this massive era-spanning epic. It's an interesting concept. Was it any good? Did they succeed in their mission of making the big epic Doctor Who story of 2020? So let's look at the theme first. Let's look at the story. What is the plot? Instead of going with the current Doctor Who era, they decided that they would focus on fan favourite David Tennant and the fan favourite storyline that everyone's been asking for since 2009. The Time Lord Victorious arc. See, in 2009 there was an episode called The Waters of Mars in which Doctor Who did a bad thing, and at the end he said, "Fuck all y'all, I'm Doctor Who, bitches, I can do whatever the fuck I want." And everyone was like, oh shit, now Doctor Who is like, you know, he's ready to go, you know? And then in the next episode he showed up and he was just kind of just Doctor Who again, like normal, and everyone was like, well, what happened to the guy who was gonna fuck shit up? For years, fans called this a missed opportunity. Not all fans, obviously. I should say, before I start, a lot of this video is gonna be heavily based on my personal opinion. I may not agree with you, you may not agree with me, but that's okay, that's alright. Now they announced this with a big fucking poster, which I'm sure will be somewhere behind me on screen, with David Tennant, and he's in the full fucking gear, and Christopher Eccleston's there, and Paul McGann's there, and Billie Piper's there, and everyone was like, whoa. This was announced as a big multimedia event where you didn't have to consume all the content, but if you did, you would get the full story. But if you just wanted to do the audiobooks, or if you just wanted to do the books, or if you just wanted to read the comics, then you would get a full story there. Which, yes, is technically true, but you would never want to consume it that way, because the stories individually are fine. And I feel like the interesting part of this project was how the stories pay off each other. Let me put it this way. If you like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then you're probably like, this is all great. Now if I said, I'm only gonna watch the Thor movies, yeah, you can do that. Nobody's like, oh yeah, you have to fucking watch all the Avengers movies, but you could also just watch Ant-Man and get as good of an experience. You wouldn't. And it's very similar in the Time Lord Victorious saga. But is it worth it? Because there was so much shit. I've got a list, I'm gonna go through it now, but there was so much stuff. And I got most of it because I was enjoying the story for what it was, and I did enjoy seeing how the different stories played off each other. But is it worth buying all this stuff now? Like, the story's over, you know, we're getting new Doctor Who soon anyway, so we don't, like, need this right now. Is it worth it? And that's what this video is kind of about. So I've got here my custom-made Time Lord Victorious box set, which has everything. And inside, I've got a little list I made, which is the viewing order. So I've got the viewing order of Time Lord Victorious, and basically I'm just gonna quickly go through these and say my thoughts on the individual storylines, how they tied into each other, and if it's worth getting everything. Again, I'm missing a couple of things which I will try to remember and point out, but this is most of it. I didn't fucking read the comics for 5-year-olds on the Doctor Who website or on the app. I don't know what, in the comic maker? I don't know. I didn't read that. I don't know what to tell you. So I'm going in chronological order because this was a big thing when this was released. They released this big chart, and the chart was like, here's all the stories that are coming out. And the first thing is they released the chart in release order. So it was like, you know, the first thing to come out is this comic book. Oh fuck. We'll talk about the release order, don't worry, because that was a fucking... They shot themselves in the foot, really. People were confused. Because people were like, is this the order I have to read it in? No. I thought I didn't have to read everything. You don't. But then what do I pick? Where do I start? What is what? There was a lot of that. The first thing in chronological order, as far as I'm aware, is Echoes of Extinction, the Paul McGann half of the vinyl record. I didn't get the vinyl record, I got the download. It's difficult to get things shipped here. You don't need this. This was at the beginning of the list of the chronological, and it's like this is the intro and the outro at the same time. You don't need it. Daleks. Now, this was a free web show, and I understand that, you know, getting something for free, you get what you get. And I should say that I thought the story itself was interesting. Time Lord Victorious introduced like 4 or 5 Dalek variants. You had the Strategist, the Emperor, who was in the comics, but you know, the red one that wanted to kill everyone, the black and red one. There was another one, I think he was green. The point is, we got all these new Daleks, and they all had personalities, and it was interesting because I felt like that's something that hadn't really been tapped into since the Cult of Skaro. So that was cool, and they're in Daleks, and that was pretty cool. The problem is that this was pushed as like a big and this is on the YouTube channel, and we're proud of this, and you can watch it, it's a big part of the storyline, and it just didn't look very good. It looked very cheap. Even for free web-based content, there is a minimum expectation. And I feel like Daleks, as fun as it was, didn't fulfill that visual expectation that an audience could have. And which is why I do believe it turned off quite a few people that didn't want to watch it just because of how it looked. Which is a shame, because it was very good. And I feel like the issue wasn't even in the modeling, it was like in the textures, but I'm sure that you have to render more the more complicated textures are. I get it, like I know it's a time and money thing, but I don't know, I feel like it could have been a bit better. The good thing so far is that you don't need Echoes of Extinction, and Daleks is for free. So at the moment, you're pretty good. If you want to get into this and you want to have a little taster, watch Daleks. Give you an idea of what the Dalek portion of the story is like. From there, we'd go to the comic Defender of the Daleks, which brings in a lot of the characters from Daleks, but it was released first. And this was a big problem, I thought, for the Time Lord Victorious rollout, because this was the first thing to be released, if I remember correctly, and it gave a lot of people some misconceptions. First of all, for some reason it's set during Series 3 of Doctor Who. It's separate to the rest of the 10th Doctor's story in the storyline, which is confusing. They made like a big thing about the reveal of the Hond at the end of the first part, and everyone said, oh, so the bad guy of this big saga is just a big goo monster. And it wasn't. The Hond were just the villains of Daleks and Defender of the Daleks. So that left people with a big misconception. It was very confusing to start with that. It didn't seem connected to the Time Lord Victorious main storyline in a big way. And it wasn't very good. It's fine. I'm not a comics person, so I'm sure someone who loves comics is probably like, no, this is a pretty good story and good on you, good for you. The Strategist is in it, who is the best of the new characters. Is one of the best of the new characters introduced for the Time Lord Victorious saga, storyline, whatever. And he plays off the 10th Doctor in a really interesting way, so I did like that. But I think it was just like that hurdle of being one of the first things, if not the first thing released in like our time, and I think it did leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because they were like, what is this? But there's a really cool cameo in it, which I liked a lot. Then there's a short story called Dawn of the Koturruh, which is free on the website. You're doing alright so far. You don't have to spend a lot of money at the moment. Get Defender of the Daleks, because it does introduce some of the Daleks in a good way, and if you enjoyed Daleks, the show, you should read Defender of the Daleks, but it's not necessary. The BBC did make their own list, by the way, but mine's better, so hang on. I'll compare and contrast. There's a lot of short stories in Time Lord Victorious. Some of them you have to buy toys for. I didn't buy the toys. I think having to buy a toy to get the story It's a bit much, but you don't need those stories. Dawn of the Koturruh is pretty cool. It introduces the Koturruh, who are, let's say, a major player in this storyline. They're basically the creators of death in the Doctor Who universe, more or less. And their story's pretty cool. I think it gives a better introduction to them than their first appearance in the book, The Night, the Fool and the Dead. So I would recommend reading this, just to get context of who they are for when they appear later on in other stories. It's very short. Speaking of other stories that they appear in, Lesser Evils is a short trip that Big Finish did, featuring the Anthony Ainley Master meeting a member of the Koturruh, and it's pretty good. I'm a big fan of the Master. They're my favourite Doctor Who villain / one of my favourite Doctor Who characters. It's interesting, you introduce a major player like the Koturruh, and it's only in this one, they're only in this one storyline so far. And you want to see them come up against like other aspects of the Doctor Who universe. So this isn't a story that's necessary. I don't think any of the stories that we've seen so far are necessary. Daleks is fine, it introduces the Daleks, which is cool, I would give it a go. Defender of the Daleks, if you enjoyed Daleks, get it. If not, it's not going to be necessary for the rest of the story. Dawn of the Koturruh, again, a good introduction to the characters of the Koturruh. Not necessary, but pretty cool. And now Lesser Evils, again, not at all necessary. But if you're like, I thought the Koturruh were pretty interesting, I want to see how they play off the Master, this is it. It's pretty good. It's pretty short, it's pretty good. Okay, so after that comes the Water of Mars. We're finally in like the main story. So as I said, everything we've just seen is like setup of the characters and the players, and now we're in the story. Time Lord Victorious stems from the consequences of the end of Waters of Mars. The 10th Doctor, if you haven't seen the Waters of Mars, I don't know how you got this far, go watch it. The 10th Doctor at the end of Waters of Mars changes time in a pretty significant way, and everyone is just sort of like, okay, so Adelaide killed herself on Earth instead of Mars, and what, the timeline is fine? Turns out, no, the timeline is fucked. I only owned Waters of Mars on DVD, but as part of Time Lord Victorious, it was re-released. This is like a sampler for the collection Blu-rays. It comes with quite a few classic stories, which have very, very loose links to the storyline, but it's cool. It's cool to get some of these stories in a higher quality than you would if you bought them on DVD. Waters of Mars is the only one that's completely in HD on here, but it's a nice little thing to have, especially if you don't already own those stories on Blu-ray and you want to see what the quality of those stories on Blu-ray is like. So yeah, Waters of Mars is next. That's the next story you should watch. The actions of the 10th Doctor changing time creates, let's say, irregularities throughout time. My only big problem with the, what is this fucking called? Road to the Dark Times, is that it doesn't come with the Infinite Quest. I know the Infinite Quest is a cartoon, and I know that it's set during Series 3, but so is Defender of the Daleks, apparently. Okay, so after Waters of Mars, you can sort of take things in whatever order you want up until the book. I would start with Monstrous Beauty, just because it's pretty interesting. This is a comic book that came with 3 separate issues of Doctor Who magazine, and as far as I'm aware, it hasn't yet been printed as like a book. Defender of the Daleks has. You can get Defender of the Daleks in 2 volumes, or you can get the trade. I'm pretty sure Monstrous Beauty is in one little comic book that came with an issue of Doctor Who magazine, and then 2 more. But you can get the magazines digitally, you can get the physical versions, you have a variety of options. Monstrous Beauty is now necessary for the story. Waters of Mars is absolutely necessary to get where the 10th Doctor is at. Monstrous Beauty is very necessary for the 9th Doctor's context. And there are some really cool ideas in Monstrous Beauty. I don't want to spoil it. One problem it does have is maybe it's a bit too short. There's substance missing, and it makes it feel a tiny bit lightweight, and also that it's trying to do too much in the time it has. And boy, are we gonna say that again today. But Monstrous Beauty is cool. So I would definitely recommend Monstrous Beauty. I'm not a comics person, I wouldn't recommend Defender of the Daleks, but Monstrous Beauty, it's got some cool moments and it's quite necessary for the story. So, Monstrous Beauty. Pick that one up. Okay, after this we get to the 8th Doctor. Now the 8th Doctor is actually like properly in this, played by Paul McGann, because he is, I don't want to say limited, but his story is primarily in the Big Finish audio dramas. And I really like Paul McGann's story in The Time Lord Victorious. It starts with he kills me not. Which, oh my god, I fucking forgot about Brian. He kills me not introduces probably my favourite character in Time Lord Victorious, who is Brian the Ood, who is an Ood that was tortured, I think. You get the storyline if you buy his toy or a t-shirt. I don't fuck with that. I just read the books and listened to the audios and did all the shit that's on this list. I didn't buy any fucking toys, but good for you if you did. He was trained to be an assassin, but he's still an Ood, so he's like super polite. He's like a butler. He's in a suit. He's got a little ball. The ball talks to him. He has like conversations with the ball. They consult each other. It's great. He's a really fun character. The first story he's in with Paul McGann is He Kills Me Not. And it's like a pseudo-futuristic western in which they visit this town and Brian the Ood has to kill someone in this town and Doctor Who has to protect them. And they sort of form a strange alliance / rivalry. It's pretty darn good. It is necessary for the story. It ends on a cliffhanger which leads to the next story. And it sets up, again, how Brian the Ood is involved with all the different characters in the story. So, yeah, it's good. I would really recommend He Kills Me Not. And the following story, The Enemy of My Enemy. It's probably my favourite story. The Daleks and the Doctor have to work together on this alien planet to investigate how it is possibly linked to the disparities in time. It's really good. I don't want to spoil anything, but I really enjoyed this one, mostly because of the Daleks. And because of how it was released, I'm pretty sure I heard this before Daleks the show came out, and I haven't yet marathoned it again, but I feel like you will start to get like some serious payoff if you're invested in these Daleks now. Like if you've seen Daleks, if you've seen Defender of the Daleks, this is where you'll start to be like, I get these guys and I know what's going on and I'm fully here for it. It's really good. I would say that this story is the one that is... It's probably my favourite story of Time Lord Victorious. And it's absolutely necessary, of course, for the rest of the storyline. We're in it now. You need all this. I'm sorry you have to buy it. Then we get to the books. The books are basically the main thing. If all of this have been the Marvel solo movies, then the first book is Infinity War. It's not as good as Infinity War. The 10th Doctor, after the events of Waters of Mars, he's gone back to the Dark Times because the time fracture in the live theatrical experience show, I don't know if they retconned it though, so it isn't part of this anymore, but he fell through it. He fucked up time in Waters of Mars. It allowed him to go to the Dark Times where he shouldn't be, and now he's there, and he's gonna fuck everything up. And this is the main story now. The Koturruh are in this, they're like the main villain. Brian the Ood is in this, he becomes like a really weird companion for the 10th Doctor. And this really is the point where you get as much payoff as you're going to get of the idea of the Time Lord Victorious, of this incarnation of the Doctor who is like, I'm the last of the Time Lords, I decide what is right for the universe, it's all on me. It doesn't completely hit the mark. It doesn't completely live up to the expectations. He does something at the end of this story which is like the big defining moment for the Time Lord Victorious, the character now that we're getting into. I wouldn't say it's worse than what other Doctors have done, but definitely the righteousness that Doctor Who has when doing this. It's more about his attitude to what he's doing than what he's doing. And if that doesn't sound interesting to you, then the whole storyline will probably fall flat, because that is what it's based on. It's more a character thing about the 10th Doctor Who's arrogance than it is, you know, he doesn't like get someone and say, I'm gonna fucking kill you and shoot them in the face. Like, he doesn't do that. Well, he kind of does. Did I set the timer? I didn't set the timer. I took a break. My energy levels might be a bit different right now than they were just a moment ago. I'd just like to call that out so that it's noticeable, if it is noticeable. I think it will be, but maybe I'm wrong. We were talking about the Night, the Fool and the Dead. So then I really hope the blue isn't close enough to the green that this disappears into the background. Then we get All Flesh is Grass, which is basically the point of Time Lord Victorious. And this is why I think the idea that, oh, you can enjoy everything. You don't have to, you can enjoy each thing. You don't have to read everything. No. Because in this, all the storylines converge. The Ninth Doctor is with vampires, the Eighth Doctor is with the Daleks, the 10th Doctor is doing his big universe thing. And I don't know, I feel like they didn't nail it. And this is like the big part of the story, and everything you've been reading and listening to, etc. is all supposed to come together for this. And I think if you read it by itself, you would be missing context and important information from previous stories, but also it doesn't build off what happens in previous stories enough for it to be satisfying enough after having consumed all the media. This book is like watching an hour-and-a-half special of Doctor Who on fast forward for 45 minutes. You get the basic gist of what's going on, you get scenes in which characters talk to each other, but I don't know, there's no better way of saying it, it just doesn't pay off the storylines well enough. I can imagine someone only reading the books because they heard that you don't need to do everything and that you can just follow one of the formats, and they show up for this book and it's just like, well, this book and the previous book, and it's just like, what is this? I'm going to very briefly go into spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything about All Flesh is Grass, then I would recommend going to... It doesn't fulfill the exciting idea of that the previous book sets up, that it's going to be the 8th and 9th Doctors versus the 10th Doctor. That's basically what the finale of the previous book set up. Doctor Who has gone off the edge, other Doctor Who's have come in to sort this out. There's a bit of that, and they do butt heads, but this isn't the story that it's sold as. There are many things in my house that make noise, and I don't know if they're picked up on the camera. It doesn't pay off the Koturruh well enough, in my opinion. The Koturruh are a very interesting new piece of lore that has been introduced in this storyline, and this should be the payoff to that idea, but the Daleks sort of take over as the main villain, and it kind of becomes the Daleks want to destroy Gallifrey, which is fine as a story, but it's not what I wanted from this, or this storyline. And I don't think that comes from my own personal expectation. I think that comes from how the event and how the series was marketed up until this point. You see the branding, you see that big poster of the 10th Doctor in the busted up Time Lord outfit, costume. You know that the others are going to be going up against him because that's what we're building towards through the whole thing. The 8th Doctor is investigating what's going wrong with time. The 9th Doctor is thrown into the dark times, is trying to get out, but like, he wants to solve the problem. He's Doctor Who. And when they find Doctor Who, they all go to war against each other for like 2 chapters. And that is the interesting bit. And this book pushes it aside. It also doesn't really know how far it should go or how far it naturally can go with the 10th Doctor into a more villainous role. And it's very awkward. There's a bit that always sticks out in my mind. The 3 Doctor Who's are surrounded by some monsters or creatures, I can't remember. They're like, how are we going to get out of this? Or we could do this, we could do this. And the 10th Doctor Who says, well, we could ask Brian to kill them. And I was like, I get it. I get what you're trying to do. You're still trying to keep that, like, ooh, he's gone a bit too far. But even in the Time Lord victorious mode, where it is very much, I'm going to make positive changes to the universe because I'm the only one with authority to do so, is, more or less the idea. my friend could just shoot them. It doesn't work properly, in my opinion. And it is a shame because there are other stories that come after this, but for all intents and purposes, this is the end of the Time Lord Victorious storyline, basically. Everything after this is like wrapping things up, but this is the finale, say, of this saga that we're engaging in, and it is a letdown. The book is too short. It jumps through events too quickly. The characters don't behave in a way I believe they should in this situation. It's disappointing. I'm saying this bit now out of spoilers because if you are watching this to find out, well, should I try Time Lord Victorious? Should I give it a go? This could be the make or break for you. It didn't break it for me. I enjoyed the other stories enough, and I enjoyed the excitement of this exploration of a new corner of Doctor Who from my childhood. I would recommend it because there are a few interesting moments in there. And I walked away from it. I enjoyed the book. It wasn't a bad book. It was just very flawed, and everything could sort of live or die on this book. And I think it does let down the whole experience in a pretty fundamental way. I'll also say there's a story called The Minds of Magnox, which is set during All Flesh is Grass, the second book. It's not necessary, and I didn't think it was particularly good. If you want to be a completionist and you want to listen to all of it, again, there's stuff that I haven't mentioned. I'll quickly go through the BBC list now in case there's anything important that I forgot. I wouldn't recommend it. After All Flesh is Grass comes the third and final Paul McGann audiobook, which is Mutually Assured Destruction. You know what? After the first two Paul McGann audiobooks, I was very much looking forward to this. I didn't love where All Flesh is Grass took the Daleks, and this is a continuation from that, so for me personally, it didn't entirely work. But, I mean, you could listen to it and be like, oh no, I loved All Flesh is Grass, and I want to find out what happens to the Daleks next. I just think that the Daleks that were introduced in this storyline deserved a better finale than this. And now we're really wrapping up. Master Thief is another short trip. This one is starring the Roger Delgado Master, and it is a sequel to The Enemy of My Enemy. It has nothing to do with the rest of the Time Lord Victorious saga. It is literally just a sequel to The Enemy of My Enemy. And it's a very loose sequel at that. You could listen to this storyline if you enjoy The Master without having touched anything else from Time Lord Victorious. So I would recommend it if you enjoy The Master. I think it and Lesser Evils came packed together actually in one download, so you may not be able to pick or choose. And then finally, and I'm going to get to this because finally you get Echoes of Extinction, the David Tennant half. And it's interesting because this is the only time David Tennant is involved with Time Lord Victorious. I mentioned earlier there's an audiobook called The Minds of Magnox. He's not in it. It's an audio book. So it's interesting to actually hear the 10th Doctor in the storyline. And even then, even with him in it, it is so... And I'm going to spoil this one, but I'm not going to put up a warning because it's a small spoiler what I'm going to say. It doesn't affect the Time Lord Victorious storyline in any way. This is very much an epilogue. But basically, he sort of says at the end, oh, I was a bit of a bad bloke, you know? And maybe I shouldn't have done what I did in the books. And I feel a bit bad because my 8th incarnation is now having to go into that, and it sucks. And that's it. And I was like, this is David Tennant in the story of the Time Lord Victorious. This is what people have been waiting for. The books are good, the books are fine, to put it in a comic, whatever, but people wanted to hear or see David Tennant perform this storyline. I feel, personally, that was a big attraction. I feel like the first half of Time Lord Victorious, the setup is a lot stronger than the payoff and its epilogue and conclusion. From this, you're probably wondering, James, is it worth me getting Time Lord Victorious? I would say that if you are a big fan of the 10th Doctor and you are interested in this sort of storytelling and the way different writers can come at a similar idea and what they can come up with, then yes, possibly I would recommend it to you. A lot of the stuff is free. Maybe try the free stuff first, see what you think. I feel like the level of quality is more or less consistent throughout. So if you read Dawn of the Koturruh, that will give you a good idea of what the books are like. If you watch Daleks, that will give you a good idea. Obviously the visuals are one thing, but it will give you an idea of what the storytelling with the Daleks is like in this saga. There is one key part of that I believe should be in every Time Lord Victorious marathon, which isn't actually officially in the listing. And that is Out of Time, the first Out of Time from Big Finish, with the 10th Doctor and the 4th Doctor. And don't worry about the 4th Doctor, I haven't forgotten about Genetics of the Daleks, I'm gonna get there. Doctor Who goes to this church outside of space to think about what he's done. And honestly, this could just be a sequel to Waters of Mars, but it works very well as a sequel to the Time Lord Victorious. And I think it pays off the 10th Doctor's behaviour a lot better than Echoes of Extinction does. And it isn't part of the Time Lord Victorious brand. I think it's a very good lead into the end of time, or to the Day of the Doctor if you want to slide that in there. I think that if you are going to do all of this, just add on top Out of Time with Tom Baker and David Tennant, because I think it is a very good run-around fun story, but I think it's very entertaining, and I think it is a better payoff to the 10th Doctor's, the way he is processing what he has done, than the Echoes of Extinction was, in my opinion. I have skipped a few things. You can find this online if you type in Time Lord Victorious story order. They give it all weird fucking names. The Fractured Universe, the Victorious Days. It's, I don't know. This is the order they recommend. If you've listened to me talk about this for however long this video has been, and you're like, okay, I want to do it, I want the full experience, then here we go. You got The Last Message is a video trailer, it's like 10 seconds long, it's for free on YouTube. In the Doctor Who annual, I believe, for 2020, there is River Song's Guide to the Dark Times. It's just a short, couple of page document written by River Song. Tales of the Dark Times was in the Doctor Who comic creator. I don't know if this is a game, if it's an app, I have no idea, but there are apparently short stories that are set during All Flesh is Grass. Then you've got all the little stories that came with the Dalek toys and shit, Mission to the Known, Exit Strategy, I think that's it. You've got the books, which I've mentioned. There's apparently a game called The Hollow Planet. I have no idea what the fuck that is. Genetics of the Daleks is a Tom Baker audiobook that they released, and if I'm not mistaken, it's just a Dalek that survived one of the many battles and events of All Flesh is Grass or Mutually Assured Destruction. And they meet Tom Baker's Doctor Who. There's an escape room called A Dalek Awakens, that's bullshit. And then I believe the only things that are left is the immersive theatrical experience Time Fracture, which I haven't been able to go to yet because there's a pandemic. I don't know if they retconned that though, so that it isn't. It was originally supposed to be part of it. But Brian the Ood is in it, I think. I don't know. I've been trying to avoid spoilers, but I think Brian the Ood is in it. Oh, and then the final thing, there was a collection of short stories. I believe it was called The Wintertime Paradox. And in it there was one story called Canaries, which brought back some elements from 90s 8th Doctor novels, if I'm not mistaken. I wouldn't recommend it if you haven't delved into the 8th Doctor expanded universe stuff. But if you have, then you might enjoy it. And that is the Time Lord Victorious. Would I recommend it as a whole? Final sum up. This video is almost over, I promise. If you're a hardcore Doctor Who fan and you're really into the lore and you want to know what happened after the Waters of Mars, you've been itching for the Time Lord Victorious story to be told, then yes, I would recommend it, but keep your expectations in check based on what I've already said. If you're more of a casual Doctor Who fan and you want to start getting into the expanded universe and you're not really sure how to do it, again, this was marketed as a way for you to try out different things of the expanded universe and get a taster of what each thing does. I wouldn't recommend this. I would say if you want to try the audiobooks and you're interested in the Time Lord Victorious specifically, listen to Out of Time. It isn't under the Time Lord Victorious banner, but I think it's the best audiobook related to this. Books-wise, I mean, there are loads of great Doctor Who books released in the last few years. If you want original stories, I think Scratchman, written by Tom Baker, is fantastic. It isn't related to New Who. There are noises! It isn't completely related to New Who, there are a few links, but I think you'll find it more enjoyable overall than the 2 books written for Time Lord Victorious. Aside from all of this, if you want to get into some classic Who, look at the Time Lord Victorious Blu-ray. There's a good few stories on there which if you haven't seen, especially The Deadly Assassin and Genesis of the Daleks, which are like proper classics. I would recommend that, keeping in mind that they are not fully in HD. I believe I said that earlier. And if you just like Doctor Who and you don't want to get into the expanded universe, then no, I would not recommend this, because it is an investment of time, energy and money, and if you aren't going to get a lot out of it, then it really isn't worth it, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm James. You can find me at Find the Ghost Music on Instagram. You can find my music on Spotify under Find the Ghost. I'm also here on YouTube. I'm not sure which channel I'm uploading this to. I have a couple. I hope you enjoyed this video. And enjoy life, and enjoy Doctor Who, and don't film a very long video about the Time Lord Victorious. I almost said the Timeless Child. Don't film a long video about that either, because nobody wants to hear what you have to say. I have talked a lot to a camera today. This camera, the lens. And it's weird because I imagine that I'm talking to someone. I imagine what you might get from what I'm saying, but in reality I am talking to a camera. It's on a tripod. It's directly in front of me. And it is weird once you've been sat here talking for, I must have been recording for a good couple of hours now. It's strange when you've been recording that long to stop talking to the camera. I gotta take down this fucking green screen now. The end of the video. Goodbye. Fucking dumb.